Hello, everyone. If you're watching this, it's probably not live anymore, but this is live. We're going to be talking about NAB Show 2024, all the biggest news. We're going to talk about Blackmagic design, the new URSA and Pixis cameras. Of course, that's making a lot of waves. We're going to talk about Rode, DJI, Insta360, Aputure. There's plenty of companies making all sorts of announcements. Of course, it's NAB time. And last year I went to NAB. This year I'm not at NAB. Obviously, you can tell. We're just going to do a live stream from home for a couple of reasons. Unfortunately, it was also tax day, so I had a lot of taxes to prepare. That was one. But also, I started feeling a little bit under the weather. Got a little bit of a cold sniffles thing going. Maybe it's just allergies. Who knows? But I guarantee you, if I went to NAB traveling on a plane, being around all those people, that sickness, whatever it was, would have accelerated to 100% and just felt like staying home, taking it easy this year. But last year I did go. You can watch that stream. I think I did a stream last year from the convention show floor. If you want to see what it's like to be there, walk around. I've done a few of those over the years. Gosh, it's been quite a while now. And unfortunately, last year there wasn't a lot not a lot of big news, not a lot of excitement, not a lot of hype. Of course, NAB is the time where a lot of these companies are making their big announcements for the year. So it kind of creates a snowball effect where announcement after announcement after announcement really builds that hype, really builds the kind of marketing buzz. And I think that's smart for these companies to do that because they can kind of ride the waves of maybe other brands making big announcements. You make a big splash over here, some of those ripples, maybe it spreads the news around to maybe smaller companies, or maybe you just get lost in the shuffle. I don't know what the smartest thing to do when it comes to marketing is, but I tend to think that NAB, if you're going to make a big announcement, now's the time to do it, and we can all ride that hype train together. This year, we've got it's better than last year. That I'll just cut right to the chase. It's better than last year. Is it as good as it could be? No, it's not 10 out of 10, but it is a really good year for NAB, and we're going to dive into it, of course, starting right off the bat with the Blackmagic design cameras, because cameras. Who doesn't love new cameras? Of course, you got some lenses out there. I think there's a few lens companies adding, focal lengths to their lineups. So you can find those. I think Siru maybe has some new night stalker lenses, whatever that might be. Maybe some new anamorphics. I even forget the company now, but there's a few anamorphic companies doing cool things in the lens space. They've got some new focal lengths out, so you can find it. In fact, let's just take a quick look here at some of the just top trending news before we dive in too much. Of course, if you have anything to say, you want to leave a comment, drop it in the live chat. I'll try and look at it when I can, as long as my screen's play nice. And we can steer the conversation that way. Or alternatively, you can always send me a DM on Instagram to join the live conversation. Be on camera, have a microphone, and we can talk live about this kind of stuff as we go. Maybe I'll save that for later if anyone wants to join and do that sort of thing. And of course, if you're not watching live and this is after the fact, you can always do that for like some other future thing. But at least for right now, if you want to hop on and join, you're more than welcome to. So live from NAB, we've got some high-end graphics tech. AI has been in the news a lot with NAB. How are we going to use AI to our advantage? What does it mean? All that kind of moral, ethical philosophy around AI. We've got AI empowered. That's the first time I've seen AI empowered. Gimbal. Okay. Rode has some stuff. I should actually pull up Rode and talk about them. I've always liked Rode as a company. Lately, I feel like, I don't know, they're not as, I don't know. I guess I'll save my thoughts for later. But I do like Rode and all the options they have. But maybe there's like too many options. So we'll talk about that. And what else we got? Live DJI presents best in class creator tool. So this is the creator economy is a buzzword that a lot of people are starting to use. The creator economy, the influencer economy, these creators. And this plays into a part I'm going to get into with the Blackmagic cameras. And I talked about it in my video talking about Gerald's video on the Sony Burano. Gerald Undone did a camera review on the Sony Burano. I think his videos are great. Definitely, you probably already know this. If you're watching this, you definitely know who Gerald is. But as I've sat with that video and that conversation, it's continued to stew in me these ideas around content creation, video production, filmmaking, cinematography, all of the things that we all know and love. But the the fracturing of the market. And it's something we're going to get into because I think it ties directly into those new Blackmagic cameras, but it's also in line with the kind of creator economy and how these products are marketed. Rode, for example, which I don't have pulled up yet, but we'll get to it, often markets to podcasters, YouTubers, creators, vloggers, that sort of thing. But I think there's a problem with that, but I don't think the solution is to market to the high-end cinema space either. So we'll get into some of that later because I'll have better examples as we start talking about these actual products. But it's something that's been in the back of my mind, and it's not taking shape just yet. This is something that I think will play out in the years to come. The industry and things, they don't just change overnight. They take time to evolve and kind of adapt, but I think it's happening right now, but we'll get into it. What else do we got? Cloud production, obviously a big thing. Blackmagic Cloud is part of all that, and just basically sending your files to the cloud for remote editing and kind of an expedited workflow, same day delivery, that sort of thing. Anything else here on the news headlines? Fujinon lenses, okay. Evo Suite updates, okay. Gen AI offerings and latest product development. So that's one thing. If you go to NAB, you'll notice there's a awful lot of live green screen keying companies like the studio, like kind of imagine what you'd see on broadcast television. I mean, that is what NAB is for. After all, it's the National Association of Broadcasters. I tried to think up some funny meme version of that just to pretend like I didn't know what it was. Maybe like the National Agency of whatever. Anyway, the green screen studio live keying, really cool technology, very impressive. There's an awful lot of them at NAB. The difference between what you see online in the YouTube kind of, again, content creator headlines, all the people who are paying attention to that, is not always reflective of what's actually happening at the show, which for the most part is a lot of broadcast high-end television production pipeline type of stuff. So it's an interesting, also plays into this kind of breaking of the audience or the markets, because there's so many creators, there's so many people hungry for, I don't want to say for YouTubing, because that's not what it is, but we're going to get into it. I'm kind of spoiling it a little too much, but yes, lots of kind of sports, live events, green screen coverage, studio production, that sort of thing. I almost read that as Lawa, but it's Lawo, and Waves integrate new super rack, a lot of boards, obviously broadcast. That's a big part of the space. Lots of buttons. The more buttons, the better in broadcast, I say. And I don't think there's that much. So let's hop on over to the Blackmagic site. Let's see here. We got one thing from Sheldon. Are you interested in the Canon C200 Mark II? Oh, Sheldon, I'm going to have to go check that out because that's a good question, but we're going to get into it. We're going to start with Blackmagic. So let me just clean up some of this stuff here real quick. And actually, I don't mind that. Let's leave it back on. And Blackmagic. What do we got? The URSA Cine 12K. Obviously, big, bold. I really like Blackmagic as a company. Their design aesthetics, their design philosophy, they make cool looking stuff. I think that's one of the biggest problems with a lot of these companies. They engineer for, I don't know, like they're engineering a TV remote or a calculator or something kind of just mundane. And these cameras, Red really capitalized on this, Red Cinema. They made cool looking cameras, and of course they're very powerful cameras as well, but the cool factor is important. And I've always liked Blackmagic being kind of second to Red. They're not the coolest looking. Blackmagic itself, the company, they kind of got the polos, the embroidered logo. They're not the coolest company, but the way they design things and the layouts of their page, I think is quite cool, actually. And I like that they put the price point here. So it's 15,000 for 12,000, which, if you remember back in the old days of 3K for 3K, it's kind of interesting that we're still tracking closely to that price point. And that is the nice thing about Blackmagic, is I've always appreciated the mindset of, we're not going to overcharge you for these things. We're going to try and give you the most premium product possible while still maintaining a reasonable budget. And of course, reasonable is very subjective. It comes down to value, but they've never been overpriced. Where I think if you look at something like the Sony Burano, I think that's 25,000. Of course, there's even higher end cameras from Sony, from Arri, from Red, which is now owned by Nikon, of course, which you probably already know that. But there's something about Blackmagic where they've offered, I don't want to say the discounted, because you think, oh, cheap, oh, dollar store. It's not that. It's the, I don't know how to quite put my word. It's the, I don't know, the mindful consumer, the person who's sitting there going, okay, I can reasonably afford to own this myself because I am a one man band or small production company. There's not a lot of us, but I can reasonably afford to have this thing that can do anything I need it to. And I can kind of compete at that higher end cinema category without spending 50 grand or 100 grand. Because when you look at Hollywood, I mean, shoot, they'll talk about movies where they're like, oh, yeah, we bought, or rented, however they do it 30 red cameras to do some crazy thing that they're doing, and where money's not an object in Hollywood. But I think a lot of creative professionals, especially in this space, want the more approachable, like, yes, I can buy it and I can make my money back without having to rely on, like, I have to get work, I have to rent it out, I have to. It's like, no, I can make an investment in something that I know is going to pay off because I have this amount of work and I'm not stretching myself too far. So I really do like that about their company. So you got the 12K for 15K. And then if we scroll down, of course, there's some other big news. We've got some news for DaVinci Resolve if you're into that sort of thing, which I'm not really into currently, but maybe something I'll play around with more. But not going to talk about Resolve too much today. But we will talk about the Pixis 6K, which is 3K for 6K. Now that's a value proposition there. So we'll get into that. But I do have some problems with this camera and this camera coming from somebody who loves the URSA Mini. Let's see. A little bit of backstory and maybe why I like Blackmagic so much. And maybe, I don't know, what do you want to hear? Do you want to hear the news or do you want to hear just me ramble about everything? Because I think it's good context for these sorts of conversations. It's not just, hey, look at this camera, isn't that cool? I love it, I hate it, etc. My opinion is informed by the history and the experience I have and using the Blackmagic cameras. First of all, I think they have one of the best user interfaces, bar none. As far as using a camera, the touchscreen, the menu, the interface, it's been incredible for the longest time. And I am shocked and kind of appalled that no other camera manufacturer has really caught on to that design ethos, that UI language that they're speaking. Just using the cameras is always really fun. It's really nice. Everything's where you would want it and expect it, and it just operates how you would want. Kind of think like I don't know, like a Tesla touchscreen in the car or like an iPad, where you go from the old buttons, which is kind of funny that they've got a bunch of buttons on here, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just in the camera, the menus, changing from like a list scroll wheel, awful Sony cinema menu, or even the mirrorless hybrid cameras that are just lists. It's like you're scrolling through a spreadsheet half the time just to change a setting, where Blackmagic just kicked that and said, nope, it's going to be more like buttons and you're going to be able to do everything you want on different, screens and pages and tabs. It's brilliant. So menus are great. I started using the URSA Mini, it was before the 4.6K. It was just the URSA Mini, I think, because at the time I was doing kind of that commercial video production, working with brands, working with clients, and this is maybe, gosh, almost 10 years ago now, and they're expecting video. They're expecting quality premium stuff. They're paying. It's not just like a random music video or, some small thing for like a friend. This was no premium video production. And showing up at that time with a GH5 or a GH4 did get the job done, but it didn't always make the right impression. So there were certain projects where we would rent or ended up buying the URSA Minis because they just speak a different visual language. When we were at that time, 10 years ago, working with clients, making them feel like, yes, we're doing something that's worth your investment. This is going to be, you can trust that this is going to look good. It's going to sound good. It's going to be edited well because we're bringing that professional package. So that evolved over time to the URSA Mini 4.6K and then the 4.6K Gen 2. And there were some problems along that journey that Blackmagic struggled with. Some of the first URSA Minis had a lot of IR pollution. So we had to use extra IR cut filters, basically infrared. When you were running the NDs, the sensor was too receptive to infrared light. You and I can't see it, but it makes your blacks kind of purpley magenta, and it's not a great look. Stunningly enough, it seems to be a problem with the Sony Burano, but I don't know. I haven't used that camera. However, Blackmagic fixed all that stuff, and they've released, generation after generation of these URSA minis. They did have the original URSA, which obviously was very large and kind of big and bulky. And I did see a few of them. People at NAB years ago were using the original URSA, the big one. And I always thought it looked a little clunky, a little silly to have the giant screen, but it did some cool stuff for its time. I'm glad they stuck with this body style, the URSA Mini style, even though this is the URSA Cine. It's more or less, it looks kind of the same layout of everything, but obviously with expanded features. And so I do like this for a certain part of the market, the part of the market that is working with somebody who's, paying you to do the work, because I think this or any camera like it helps evoke and build that trust in those environments. But this is where we get to things changing a little bit. I think the clients, the brands, the people who are paying for the work are they're just aging up. So it's all of us who came up using, maybe the 5D Mark II or maybe the 7D, the Canon, DSLRs that really kicked off hybrid video production on a photography camera. And you see the rise in TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts. You have creators, influencers making content on their smartphone. So I think nowadays the mindset from a client perspective is starting to change. It doesn't really matter what camera you're filming with as much as it used to, maybe 10 years ago, where people looked at, when I had a GH4 or GH5, they're like, are you taking photos or what are we doing? And that I never wanted that friction. It was no, like clearly you look at a camera like this and that's a meaningful cinema camera. I think that's changing a little bit, especially nowadays when people want you to shoot vertical. A client might be making something just for TikTok or social and they want vertical video. You can rig this to be a vertical shooter, but it's definitely not meant for that. This is meant for cinema. So if you're an independent filmmaker, a working professional, and this camera speaks to you, perfect. For me personally, it's not the type of work I do as much anymore. I'm much more of like that creator style content. And it just doesn't make sense to use a camera like this to make something that I don't want to say is not cinematic, because you can make cinematic images with an iPhone, for example. Look at the iPhone and the marketing they do around, oh, this commercial was shot on iPhone, and you can have a film set and do all this stuff. You can shoot ProRes, you can record to an SSD, you can do all this crazy stuff with an iPhone now and treat your iPhone like it's a cinema camera. In fact, I did a video on the Blackmagic design, the Blackmagic camera app for iPhone. It might also be for Android, I'm not actually sure. Love that app. So I like those cinema features being available in a phone. Very cool. But this to me, even though I come from a long history and still have, an URSA Mini, it's something I don't even choose to use anymore. I choose to use the GH5 or the GH6 or other smaller hybrid cameras, even having access to an URSA Mini 4.6K Gen 2. I don't use it anymore because it's not always about optimal dynamic range or optimal picture quality or the, B-raw having the most flexibility with your codec. Sometimes it's about the efficiency of the whole workflow and what it's like to create the content, to shoot the video, to take the photos seamlessly in one body. If I'm shooting with the URSA Mini, it's not a practical camera for taking a picture for a thumbnail. So that means I have to bring another camera, I have to switch it, I have to have more lenses, more batteries, more memory cards. And when you want to like operate like an influencer, like a content creator and have that efficiency, the URSA Mini just doesn't work in the same way that a true hybrid mirrorless camera does. I'm not saying this doesn't have place. I'm saying this URSA Cine doesn't have place for me. So let's move on and talk about the Pixis, which may be more in line with what you or I or anyone else might find interesting or valuable. The Pixis 6K. 6K is great. Great resolution. Of course, the biggest, I don't know, the biggest, the screen is built into the side. There's no flippy screen. And I know what everyone's going to say. Well, if you're using a camera like this, you're going to have a top monitor. You're going to use something like the Video Assist or a Shinobi or an Atomos, whatever your video monitor is going to be. You're going to put it on the top. So having a screen on the side that's fixed doesn't matter. We can get into that. Of course, you got some more buttons. You got the EVF tacked on here to the side, but this is a $3,000 cinema box camera. And everyone's excited that it's a box. It's a box. It's a box. Oh, it's a box. Finally, a box. Because everyone who likes Blackmagic and is at this level, I think, is coming from the pocket cinema camera, which is more like a hybrid mirrorless photography camera. Even though it's a little bit bigger than that, it's always been a little strange to me. But we can get into some of the nuance of what I actually think of all these things. But anyway, the Pixis 6K, you can read about the specs. Of course, this is a full frame sensor, which is another point of interest compared to this, to the 12K. So they say it's a large format cinema Cinematic digital film sensor. I don't know what large format means because it's full frame. Like you can see 6K full frame, but they're calling it large format, which is very confusing because from a photography standpoint, large format is absurdly monstrous. No one is making digital sensors like large format. They might technically exist in a lab somewhere, or maybe someone's done, a really expensive large format digital sensor, but this is not large format. This is 35 millimeter full frame. Even full frame, I don't really like. It's 35 millimeter because you get like the 36 and the 24. And I think the 35 might be the diagonal. It's somewhere around there. I got to look it up. But it's interesting because Blackmagic is also working on what they call a 65 millimeter sensor, but that one's only like 50 mil. I don't know. There's some shenanigans going on with what we're calling what, and I think it'd be better if we were all on the same page and speaking the same language of this is not large format, this is full frame, and let's call it 35 millimeter because that's if that's what it is, that's what it is. It's a box. Okay, so I think it's basically the pocket cinema camera in box form, which maybe is something that you're into. And if you love the box style, I know there's plenty of people out there. You can go watch other YouTube videos. You can go read the comments. There's lots of people who want a box. I don't want a box because the problem with the box is that you have to add everything to it to just get back to square one, which is what you have with any kind of mirrorless hybrid camera. When you think about adding a grip to this, you don't have the functionality built in that you have on a grip of, like, let's say, any photography, quote unquote, photography camera, because all the buttons are there, the triggers are there, the shutter, everything is right there. You can add all those buttons, but you have to add them. And then there's compatibility issues. If it's not made by the right manufacturer, it's for this camera specifically. So I'm not a huge fan of the box design because you inevitably build it out bigger anyway. Now, there is something to be said for if you find the shape and form factor of certain cameras limiting, I can appreciate that a box gives you more flexibility, more custom control. That makes sense. I get it, but it's not for me. Again, I want the camera that can take photos, that can do video. After all, video is just moving pictures. And I think there's a lot of benefits that photographers figured out over the years of this is the shape of the camera, this is how it operates, this is where the buttons are. It all makes sense and it's usable, it's intuitive, and it's fast and it's efficient. Those same principles apply to video, filmmaking, etc. If there's a specific reason you need a box camera for a particular rigging configuration, great. But I don't think it is the end all be all of camera design of just make a box and then build it however you like. That was Red's style. And when you're thinking of Hollywood filmmaking, cinema production from 10 or 20 years ago, when we came from the Red One and how awkward and clunky that thing was, making a box and saying, hey, Hollywood cinematographer, hey, film set, figure it out. You can go figure it out. That makes sense. For a content creator, a YouTuber, even an independent, video production professional, you can make this work. And if it solves all your problems and it's your dream camera, then buy it. Don't let me steer you otherwise. But for me, I gravitate towards the hybrid mirrorless style because of all those added built-in efficiencies. The screen flips and does everything I need it to. And I'm not talking about just being a YouTuber. This is where I'm going to start getting into my thesis, my hypothesis. There are two mindsets. There's cinema and then there's influencers. Let's just call them that for the time being. You might prefer other words, but there's cinema broadcast professionals and then there's content creator influencers. For the longest time, there was a lot of overlap between those two things because the devices were kind of limited and the cinema cameras were big and bulky and expensive. And so if you wanted a cheap throwaway camera, you just kind of got a mirrorless one, maybe like a Canon 7D back in the day, just as kind of your junky camera or your tiny thing you could fit in a corner, or like a GH4, GH5, that sort of thing. And so cinema still used GoPros and things like that. And then at the same time, you had influencers and YouTubers and content creators coming up in the space, making more money, wanting to stretch further. So they'd buy things like a Red. MKBHD is the first one that comes to mind, but I'm sure there's plenty of them where they're doing YouTube, but they're doing it at such a high level and they're making so much money, they can afford to invest in really, really nice camera equipment. So for a lot of time, there's a lot of cross-pollination. As the technology has gotten better and things have started to really blur between those lines, I think these companies have struggled to figure out, how do we market this? Is it for cinema professionals? I think that's what Blackmagic is going for. It seems like they're breaking away from, we don't care as much about you being a YouTuber or a content creator. This is for cinema work. And we'll see if there's another pocket cinema camera. But based on these announcements with the URSA Cine and the Pixis, it seems like no. These are lots of buttons. This is in broadcast, cinema, Hollywood, that style. So then someone like me who's sitting there going, well, I want a hybrid camera. I kind of like the pocket cinema camera, but I want some of the benefits that I'm not getting with it, like in-body image stabilization, like really good autofocus, some of those hybrid selling points, which funny enough are now making their way into things like the Sony Burano, a cinema camera. So that cross-pollination of marketing is kind of hard to break down, because on the flip side, a lot of companies, and I think they've not seen very much success with this. At least I'm kind of reading the tea leaves. I have no insight into their marketing and their return and anything like that. But you look at things like Sony and the A7C, or Lumix has made a few cameras that are marketed as, this is the vlogging camera. This is for YouTubers. The screen flips up a certain way. Sony and Lumix, and maybe even Canon and Nikon to a certain degree, have made cameras marketed as vlogging YouTube content creation cameras. But at the end of the day, they haven't really sold, because everyone no one wants the vlogging camera. I truly believe, this is my thesis. I truly believe that there are a lot of people like me who want the professional working tool. So it doesn't overheat. It's got good autofocus. It's got, well, sorry, it doesn't overheat. It records in the codecs, the professional premium codecs that we would want, 422, 10-bit, right? It gives me the professional features in a body that comes with those benefits of the YouTubing content creation influencing space, where I can take a photo. It's got in-body image stabilization. It's got really good autofocus. It's small, it's compact. I don't have to have these massive batteries or use specific cinema lenses. I can use the native lenses. And I see that those cameras, they haven't been marketed as such, because most hybrids get marketed as photography devices, and that's what everyone will scream till they're blue in the face. It's for photography, it's not for video. But 9 times out of 10, I see people gravitating towards Sony and the Sony Alpha universe of those cameras, the A7R5, whatever they're on now, the A7S3, the A7 IV. They're a nice stepping stone to get into the cinema line from Sony, because it's all E-mount. So the lenses you buy, it all just works. It's really smart what Sony has done. But I think there's a marketing language that's not being spoken, in that there are plenty of what you would call YouTubers, even like this channel, right? It's not big. I'm not making money on my YouTube channel, but I'm working professionally and also wanting a camera that can help me make YouTube videos. And I find that there's so many people like that. Maybe you're one of them. You're the type of person watching this going, yeah, that URSA Cine 12K looks cool. I could get some great images out of it. But I also couldn't use it for photography. I couldn't use it for making a YouTube video, especially if it's a vlog style. So you go, oh, all right, well, yeah, I guess I'll use it if the job calls for it. Maybe you're looking at something like the Pixis, saying, yeah, that's cool. That's great. I love, but ooh, that's going to be a little limiting. The screen doesn't flip around. I'd have to rig it out. That doesn't quite fit as nicely in just a small backpack if I want it to. Maybe it does. It's not that big. But there's something to be said about wanting the photography features, the benefits of the small compact size, but still having access to the professional tools. And I feel like that's where we've gotten, because most of the cameras nowadays, the photography cameras, are 422. They are 10-bit. They do high frame rates. They have log profiles where you have the expanded dynamic range. You have, in certain cases, access to raw recording if you want. Everything is being built into these mirrorless hybrid cameras for photography. And oftentimes the only limitation is an artificial one imposed of, well, we're going to put a record limit in there, or we've got it overheats. They'll say it overheats, which some of them do overheat, which I'll make a whole separate video about. That's a whole nother thing about the Lumix G9 Mark II. But for the most part, things for me, like the GH5, professional working camera, there's probably plenty of you out there who still shoot with the GH5 because it's a working professional tool, but it's also a great kind of hybrid content creation, if you just want to throw together a YouTube video, you want to do a live stream, you want it, whatever you want to do, you can do with that type of camera. Same with the GH6 or the, like, let's say the S1H or the S5 Mark II or the Sony Alpha cameras. A lot of them are so good at everything. And the artificial limitations aside, like if you just remove those or we just build like a slightly better one, like put a fan in it and call it a day. Or that's what my biggest thing that I've been asking for is electronic NDs. Put those in there and it's got everything I need. I don't need it to be shaped like a box and then I have to build out a whole new kit and rig just to get somewhere that I don't want to go. Because at the end of the day, the Pixis, if I build that out, I end up kind of getting the URSA Cine 12K. And that's also not something I want. Like I said, I have access to an URSA Mini G2, but I choose not to use it for a vast majority of the work that I do because it's just not necessary and it's not practical. It's not functional. It slows me down because I'm not shooting this type of content on a day-to-day basis. And I don't think a lot of other people are either. Maybe you are, and that's okay. Again, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the segment of the market that's maybe like me, that's kind of doing a little bit of everything and wants the flexibility to go between making a YouTube video and making a corporate commercial, making an explainer video, making a TikTok, and just bouncing between all of them. And it doesn't really matter because you buy the one camera and then you can invest in other things like the lighting. Nowadays, when you're competing with somebody who can shoot a TikTok on their phone, it doesn't make sense to have this giant of a package to show up with a whole crew to make a TikTok. You might want to do it better than what a phone can allow, or you do it on your phone and use something like the Blackmagic camera app. This large format sensor, again, it's not large format. We're talking full frame here. The buttons, I'm sure they're nice for somebody, but it's not in a place I would want. It's just not, it's not the style I gravitate towards. There was a shoot years ago where the intent was to bring the URSA Mini, but for a variety of reasons, it wasn't available. And so I had to shoot it on the GH5. And I shot the whole thing on the GH5 and came back at the end of the day and was like, that was a lot easier. I was a lot faster. I was able to get shots that I wouldn't have gotten. And the ultimate visual quality, like there was no difference because by the time you get past color grading, by the time you get past distribution and publishing on the internet and exporting for YouTube, no person watching was saying, well, that's not the URSA. This looks bad. It's the GH5. No, it looked the imperceptible difference, no difference. Now, there might be certain situations you find yourself in where you wish you had a little bit more dynamic range, or for whatever reason you wanted this body style, right? Like I said, to impress a client or something like that. But as the person who's making the content, the tool I would pick 9 times out of 10 is the one that is the Swiss Army knife, kind of gets everything done. I can take a picture, I can shoot a video, and I got it all right there. That to me is my dream camera, as long as we retain the professional tools. I don't want the YouTuber vlogger camera. That's not what I'm looking for. I want the professional camera with all the great high-end features in a body style that can also take photos and is really good for just general content creation. All right, we got a lot of people in the live chat here, so let me read through these real quick. Oh, Sheldon was saying that Canon C200 Mark II is just a rumor, no release dates. I would say that I'm probably not interested. Just gut reaction. Rambo, I wish I knew URSA EF mount. Yeah, we've got there's always a different personal preference. So if you prefer the URSA Cine 12K, don't let me stop you. Call me an idiot, call me crazy, call me whatever. That's fine. But having an URSA Mini G2 and choosing intent, like I choose to use the GH5 or the GH6. You know, this is like years ago now. But that's a choice that I made for like my personal satisfaction and enjoyment of filming content, is to choose, people say, the right tool for the job. The right tool for me was the smaller, lighter weight, better form factor for just being creative, making content, and still achieving really high-end, pleasing visual results. Because I don't want to sacrifice that. I don't want to say, yeah, shoot on a GoPro. No, it's finding the balance between the two. We've also got Insta360 with a new 8K camera on the horizon. They're going to have the announcement page ready in like a day. It's already been leaked. We can take a look. It's the X4 8K camera. It's basically like the X1, the X2, the X3, all the ones that came before. I really like these cameras. I think they're kind of fun and kind of playful. I don't use them all the time, but I do enjoy them for what they are. And it's just an upgraded 8K version of that style camera, if that's your thing, something that's on the horizon. So between now and in a day when they make the proper announcement, don't buy an X3. Just wait for the X4. We've got that. DJI has announced the Avata 2. This FPV style is not really my taste. I think it's kind of a one-trick pony. Once you kind of see those shots, I think you kind of get sick of them. You know, if it's something you need to do specifically for like live sports, if you can even live from these things, like dirt bikes or something like that, where you're chasing and it's or like a ski slalom or anything, you know, sports where it's run after run and you want that kind of cool tracking shot. Super cool for those kind of specific use cases. But for general purpose, I think it's a little too much. It's a little bit too much of that like one kind of look. I would associate it with a GoPro, where for the longest time it was just fisheye. It was just the GoPro shot. The FPV shot is cool, but it's not the. I would prefer just a regular drone for general aerial photography. Something like the Mavic 3, I think is a more like the Swiss Army knife. Like having that flexibility, I think is maybe more interesting and more valuable than the high-speed racing, chasing FPV shots that at the end of the day get kind of repetitive and stale. There's been a few movies where they've done a lot of them, and the choreography can be quite satisfying to watch that play out, but personally, I get kind of sick of it. The other thing they announced, DJI announced, which is hard to find on their site, oddly enough, is this RS4 Pro. It's like 4 pages back on the banner. And then even if I go in here, the thing I'm most interested in is that LiDAR module, which I've talked about before, basically giving you autofocus for manual lenses. This page isn't loading for some reason, but I still can't find it on here. You got to go, I think if you search LiDAR, maybe they're updating their website or something. It's still, you have to scroll all the way down to the bottom to get the Focus Pro. That's what they call it. Not the greatest unique name, but hey, whatever, it works. This is kind of interesting and cool if you are using those cinema lenses and you want autofocus for your manual glass. Not my personal taste, but I do find it cool and interesting that the technology exists. You know, $1,000 to get autofocus on anamorphic lenses. Yeah, not bad. Oh, sorry, I wasn't sharing the right tab. It's this one. So this is the Focus Pro. And if you check it out, yeah, maybe it's your thing. Aputure has a new Infinimat. I'm trying to get a read on this and what exactly I would use it for. Probably nothing at the end of the day, but these expandable mats where you can kind of rig and configure them to expand is a really good idea for studio control, where you can build something and set it and leave it. I think rigging this on any kind of, you know, day-to-day production where you need to set it up and tear it down could be quite a chore, especially if you're working kind of by yourself or with a small team. But rental grade construction, pixel control, yeah, it's kind of interesting. I think it's rather expensive. I don't know exactly if they've released pricing, but look, I mean, that's a giant box. You're gonna be doing some serious setups with that sort of thing. And then over on Rode's site, we got these interview microphones, a phone cage. So funny. Speaking of people shooting cinema on their phone, it's like, yeah, you can do it with a cage. Like this is now a style just as much as the URSA Cine 12K. There's people who want cinema features in their phone. And your phone's what, $1,000? Do you even consider it a cost because you already have one? Podcasting, Wireless Pro. So this is where my issues with Rode come in. I've not had the best luck with these Wireless Pros. I've had more luck with the DJI mics and Comica mics, funny enough. These ones, I don't know what Rode is trying to do, but they seem like less premium, less professional than they used to be. And maybe that's just perception. Maybe it's not true. But the podcasting and stuff, I'd probably get a board like this if I needed to. but it seems like they're really trying to scale down to the content creator podcaster level. And like I talked about before, that's not my style. I want the premium professional reliability, consistency, call it prosumer. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. But that category has existed for the longest time. And yet it's really tricky in the nuance of how to express that, how to market to. I think everyone who's in that category just kind of figures it out. And maybe that's the ultimate solution. You market to your high-end cinema people and you market to your low-end content creators, and then the people in between just pick what their preference is. But I think there's an awful lot of them. I think that's why cameras like the GH5 are so popular, because it's one of those cameras that does all the high-end work and the low-end work all in one package. It's just beautiful. It's beautiful. No complaints. Doesn't overheat, unlimited record time, in-body image stabilization. You know all the things. So that's from Rode. And then beyond that, I haven't seen much other news, honestly, out of NAB. I'm sure there's a lot more in the broadcast space, cloud workflows, AI, and all that stuff. Doesn't really apply to me as much, so I just find that I'm not all that interested in it. But I do like Blackmagic, the company, even though I personally probably won't buy either of these cameras. The problem with the Pixis for me, to really break it down and get in more detail. So the Pixis for me, it's not about the screen, honestly. If that was the takeaway, me talking about the screen before, I don't even care. I would run a top screen and that'd be fine. This doesn't have built-in NDs. So any reason for going with a more premium professional cinema style body, it already doesn't have the one thing that I want, which is built-in NDs. The 12K, I believe, does have built-in NDs, but this one does not. So maybe there'll be a Pixis 6K Pro, which is what they did with the Pocket Cinema cameras, I believe. They came with the Pro versions that had the built-in NDs. That's what I want. And so it doesn't have that. So already I'm kind of like checked out. It doesn't have in-body image stabilization. There's no IBIS. So the whole point of having the smaller camera is the form factor, is the size, the convenience, but then you need IBIS to really stabilize it. Otherwise, you end up just building out all these stabilization systems and you lose the benefits of the small size. If you want to shoot handheld without IBIS, you need something with weight, something that's like hefty, like the URSA Cine 12K. The URSA Mini G2 is great handheld because there's enough weight and bulk to it. The moment you scale down to something like a GH5 or even this box camera, if there's no IBIS, then I kind of go, oh, well, shoot, it's going to look pretty shaky unless I then go stabilize it. So that's another problem. Also, I'm looking for more advanced features nowadays. Sony has killed it with autofocus. If I'm going with a camera of this size, of this price point, I need it to have really good, reliable autofocus nowadays. And I don't want to have to rig it out with the DJI LiDAR Focus Pro just to use these IRIX lenses. I need it to have good autofocus built in because Sony checks all those boxes. And I'm not a fan of the Sony cameras by any means. I think some of the overheating limitations are really annoying. I think the menu and the functionality in using those cameras is quite confusing. It's just a chore to kind of switch settings and modify anything through the menus. But I do like the technology of those Sony Alpha cameras. And for this price point, this style, if I'm getting something L-mount, I want to use L-mount glass. I want to use the native L-mount glass that has the autofocus stuff built in. Now, this probably does have autofocus, but I'm sure it's not going to be anything amazing or stellar. It's probably like, yeah, I can do it technically, but it's not continuous. It's not good for video because they're not marketing it like that. And nor does anyone expect that from Blackmagic. They say, oh, well, that's for like filmmaking. You don't need autofocus for filmmaking. Well, it's filmmaking plus everything else. Content creation. LCD monitor is nice. It's on the side. Controls at your fingertips. Side plates mounting. It's really cool. It's great. In fact, let's go take a look at the announcement video because that might shed a little bit more light on some of these things. So we can pop over here. This is it's 2 hours, but it's not going to be 2 hours. We're going to skip ahead. But I did think this intro was interesting. If I hit play and it plays nice, I think I can actually make this a little bigger. If your impression is that all this was shot with an URSA, no. This is not representative of the cameras. It's something else. Beautiful images, though. Beautiful. And you're going, oh, Blackmagic made all this? Oh, man. Blackmagic did this? Wow. It's DaVinci Resolve, which, credit where credit's due. Blackmagic, it's their product. But it's not like all this was shot with their cameras or anything like that. It was all color graded on Resolve, which is an industry standard. So I don't think that should surprise or shock anyone else. So let's get to the cameras, because they talk for quite a while. Grant talks quite a while about all the various broadcasting things, which are really cool. If you want to do cloud stuff, totally fine. You want to get into Resolve, totally fine. But I want to talk about the cameras, which come out right about here.
It has 16 stops of dynamic range.
Oh, let's go back a little bit.
I can get a shot there. There it is. So it's a 17K sensor, and that's the current 12K sensor for an URSA Mini Pro. Now it's a full 65mm in size. So you can see it there compared against the original sensor. You can really see how big it is. Now it's 50.808 millimeters.
Okay, so where's the 65 coming from? Maybe I'm just... Are we talking about the diagonal? If it were truly as tall as 65mm film, I need to break down this math. Maybe one of you can help me out. If it's 50mm across and it's 23.3mm tall, and the diameter is 55mm, how is it a 65mm sensor? I don't like, these seem like it should be pretty straightforward numbers. If it's a 65mm sensor, I would think 65 would be in there somewhere. Now, again, if you said, oh, if the vertical was taller, then the diagonal would be greater and it would be 65. So if it's like a cheat, hey, it's ultra wide and that's how it works. I'm assuming, but again, I don't know. And it just is a little bit confusing how we talk about these
millimeters by 23.316 millimeters. It's a similar size as a 70mm 5 perf film. It has the same photo sites as the new full frame 12K sensor. So this larger size means the sensor is 17K. Its resolution is actually 17,520 pixels by 8,040 pixels. It has 16 stops of dynamic range. So let me show you how the camera, I'll bring it out.
So this is where we get the camera. 17K.
There it is there.
See, that's
called URSA Cine 17K. I'll turn it on.
This is coming later this year, the bigger one.
So you can see it's very similar to the 12K.
The same though.
But the 12K was designed to handle the 17K speed. So both of these models were developed at the same time. So it's pretty cool. It's got such a large sensor. Cool. We need some new lens mounts. So we have the LPL and the Hasselblad lens mounts. And URSA Cine 17K will include both. Let me take off the lens so I can show you the sensor. I'll probably
look at the sensor.
Turn it back off again.
Let's go.
Let's
go for the smaller guy.
It's got a great sensor. It's full frame 35mm, open gate 3x2. It allows really shallow depth of field.
I don't think this is a new sensor.
It's got the full
height
for
same
anamorphic.
Pockets in
the sensor resolution is 6048 by 4032. So it handles a lot of different film formats. It's got the 13 stops of dynamic range. So it preserves a lot of shadow and highlight detail. It's got the color Generation 5 color science, which has got really rich cinematic images, plus a 12-bit camera encoding for wide dynamic range. It's really...
you got the photo button on the side, but I just can't imagine. You can take a photo with any camera, a screenshot, whatever, but it's the ease in which you're taking the photo. That's my point.
Nice. It's got a real natural film response to color adjustments, accurate skin tones. It can shoot up to 120 frames a second when it's windowed. It's got two native ISO settings there, 400 and 3200. And you get up to 25,600 ISO. So it's even very clean when you're shooting in low light. So I'll put the lens back on.
I love how simple this video is.
So the front has the
put together.
USB-C for the viewfinder. And there's also a mini XLR audio input there, if we can get a shot there.
It's very chill.
For phantom power. Plus you can plug, it's a microphone input with 48 volts for phantom power. Plus you can plug the microphone in there.
We're going to go real time.
Now let's check out the other side of the camera here. You can see it's got the LCD, so 4-inch touchscreen. So the camera runs Blackmagic OS. So let's use all the features in Blackmagic OS, and it's the same size LCD as the URSA Mini Pro, but it's brighter. So it's better in daylight. Even has 3D lookup tables, which also come on the monitoring out. It has the heads-up display for status and record parameters, and you can touch the controls to adjust them. It also has a digital slate, so you can tag files with metadata for post-production. But there's also a bunch of direct controls on the side there for all the important controls, such as a dedicated button for ISO, white balance, and shutter. Plus, there's also a scroll wheel for iris adjustment, which is really useful. So an LCD is great, but all these controls can be used by feel, these menu controls, so they're really nice to have. There's also some customers.
So you got to be really in tune with your camera to get that comfortable with the buttons, to know them by feel alone. Any camera with more than like 3 buttons, you're going to look. You're going to have to. You can't do it just on feel. Maybe you can. But there are lots of cameras that have lots of buttons that to this, that I get very used to using, and I still have to like look and go like, am I hitting the right one? Just to make sure. The only time I think I could go by feel is if I was using the camera in the same. So on the GH5 and the GH6, I can, because I'm holding the camera the same way every time, and the buttons I need are within that grip configuration. Anytime you have to move to press a button, or like, you're kind of shooting like this, maybe through your eyepiece, and you go up to do it by feel. I don't think that's how you change the aperture on electronic lenses on the URSA Mini. Use the forward and back play buttons. And I think I still would always have to look. Having shot with that camera, gosh, countless times, I would still have to look to adjust aperture, because it's just that's not how you do it. The buttons are there, but you have to look. I know some people got really good at T9 texting back in the day, but a BlackBerry, like I'm thinking of a BlackBerry with all those buttons, could you text just on feel and not have to look? Maybe, but that's a lot of room for typos.
Some assignable function keys in there as well. And you can set those buttons up for whatever functions you like. It's all done through the menus. And then, of course, there's the big, large red record button. Plus, there's buttons for high frame rate, focus, zoom, and grabbing stills and accessing the menus as well. So it's really cool. Actually, I'll turn it on. Switches on the back there. And I can bring the menus up. There, see? So you can see the menus.
Yeah, the Blackmagic menu is
now on the other
incredible.
side, we have these
no ProRes though.
Custom
just
side
Blackmagic
plates.
Raw. Interesting.
There. And if I can grab one of the guys could bring over the cheese plate one. Now the camera's designed to be rigged, so we're never really quite sure. Cool, thanks. We didn't get this here. So you can see you can change the side plates. There's a riggable one. So we're never really quite sure how people are going to use it. So we've designed a lot of flexibility in. So having these side plates, they can be changed, and you can get different types of plate, but they're really simple. I mean, people can machine their own.
So you can say that you like the box camera, and it's finally, Blackmagic finally has the box. They finally have the box. Okay. So let me just, maybe you don't know. There's been an S1H box camera for quite a while now. The Lumix BS1H is an S1H as a box camera. That's actually pretty affordable considering full frame, 6K, all these things. This is an old camera now. Let's see. What do we got? 14 plus stops dynamic range. Of course, like who's to say? Maybe that's a little inflated. But box cameras have existed for quite a while. However, this has 4 reviews. Let's go take a look. Lumix S1H. I don't know how these things sell, but based on just reviews alone, I would say that the mirrorless camera style sold better because it's got 58 reviews. That's not scientific. We could do the same thing with the Lumix GH5, which you can't even find on B&H anymore, so I'd have to do this over on Amazon probably. We have the GH5, very popular, very, very popular camera. We all know and love the GH5. There's also the BG1. What the heck's that thing called? The BG1? No, the BGH1. Because they couldn't call it the BGH5, but it's the same thing. The GH5 in a box. 12 reviews. Box camera. Good for certain applications. If you need a small, tiny little box and you want to rig and configure it however you like, This has a place. I'm glad it exists, but I don't think it is the end all be all solution of like the holy grail of cameras is a box. We need it to be a box. Because if it were, I think these cameras would have sold much better than they did. I mean, the BS1H, I mean, granted, it came out, it was a little bit more expensive. But I'm wondering, does this have IBIS? I don't think it does. So I feel like that's the one thing you would be getting from the S1H. Yeah, no image stabilization. Whereas the S1H gives you that, plus all the photography features. I'm pretty sure the S1H has IBIS. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe am I misremembering? Let's see. Yeah, image stabilization. Yeah, yeah. Okay. So pick your poison. Maybe you don't want the photography style. Maybe you hate that this is not a box. It is expensive, new, but you can find them used, I think, pretty affordably. And of course, it doesn't have autofocus. It does have autofocus. As a clarification. I don't want to speak like everyone else. It has autofocus. It's not reliable, continuous autofocus in video. There, that is more precise. It doesn't have phase detect. The screen on here is also the old style flippy. My most anticipated, highly, like what I want the most is a successor to this camera, the S1H. I want an S1H Mark II or whatever they call it. Give me built-in electronic NDs. Give me a little bit better screen configuration like they got on the GH6. Give me phase detect. So include all the new things Lumix has been adding. They got camera to cloud now. They've got proxy recording that they just announced. Give me the latest and greatest features, phase detect, etc. Put it in an S1H Mark II along with an electronic ND, and I'll happily pay. I don't know if I'll happily pay 4,000, 3,000, because you got to like earn the market share, right? 3 to 4K, I think is the perfect price point for that style of camera, and it checks all the boxes. Because I'm looking at the S1H going, that's a pretty good value, pretty good value. Even the box style, even better value for the same image quality, but you lose things. So the box exists. Everyone is excited about the Pixis. Like, yeah, it's existed. Like you could have had this for the while. And I don't think there's any internal RAW recording on this. So if you like B-RAW for whatever reason, there you go. This is even more of a box. This is a true box. There's no screen on any side of this. What is nice about this style, though, I will say, is the battery allows it to be bigger. So the battery doesn't go into an internal compartment. It hangs off right at the back. So you can have a slightly larger capacity battery. And I think that does make sense for a lot of video production because it tends to take more battery to shoot video compared to photo. And you tend to be recording longer. So having a bigger expansion for the battery makes a lot of sense. And yeah, it exists. This is old now. I don't even know if you find these used. It's only got 4 reviews. So how many did they sell? I don't know. You can still buy them, 2,500. It's in stock. Pretty good value to me if you want a box. Now, granted, the Pixis is probably really nice. Got B-RAW if you want it. But it's not a game changer, as they might say. It's just an evolution. And maybe does make more sense than the Pocket Cinema camera in terms of form factor. Maybe that makes more sense because the Pocket Cinema camera is not, it's just a little too big, a little not quite optimized for handheld, I think. Let's see, what do you all have to say? ProRes employee is the existence of casual res. ProRes implies the existence of casual res. I don't know what that means. Casual resolution, like people are expecting it to be 4K or what I don't know what you're saying. But thank you for being here, Rhett. And I think that'll mostly wrap it up. That's my thoughts on the Blackmagic design stuff, their announcements, as well as many of the other announcements that we went through. I think at the end of the day, long story short, pick the camera that you like, that satisfies, checks all your boxes that you need, but don't be fooled into thinking that cinema style is the way to go. You might be tempted. You might say, oh, that looks amazing. That looks so cool. whether it's the URSA Cine or the Pixis, they both look really cool. But if you're coming from content creation, hybrid shooting, that style thing, this, you will sacrifice a lot to shoot this way. Even with this box camera, there are trade-offs you are making. You will lose things that you may end up wanting back in hindsight. And it looks cool. It's more riggable. It's all that stuff. It's got more buttons, more mounting points. Yes, of course. It's got ultimate image quality. You've got a bigger sensor along the way. But what does that mean? It means bigger lenses, specific lenses. Again, if you want any kind of autofocus, you're going to have to look at solutions like the DJI LiDAR system. Now, how many cases are in your kit? Now, how much stuff do you need to bring every single shoot just to get things that come in something like an A7 IV? Those alpha cameras from Sony have autofocus built in. They've got the dynamic range. They've got all the things. And I'm not the biggest Sony fan, but those cameras squeeze the technology into a body. Granted, there's overheating issues. That's solved with a fan. Put a fan in the camera, not you yourself. I'm saying Sony, if they were smart, they would solve those problems for themselves. Now, they may end up competing with themselves because they have their high-end cinema line, which I'm sure they're afraid is, going to be cannibalized by the alpha. But why does that fear even exist? If the cinema style, the bigger cameras are better, why is there always this fear? Even Canon for the longest time, they operated as if the DSLRs, the mirrorless tiny photography cameras, well, they're just going to cannibalize our broadcast market. They're going to cannibalize our cinema cameras. Well, that just tells me that those are better. If if they're more popular, if that's what people want, and you're artificially crippling them with overheating issues and saying, well, you don't have access to these certain, we're not going to give you shutter angle. We're not going to give you open gate, even though you could. To cripple the cameras in such a way to protect your high end is a way to where you can read between the lines and get the answer that is what I'm saying, which is that those cameras are incredibly popular because they're so powerful and because it's the preferred form factor for a lot of people. Maybe not everyone. If you like cinema style, by all means, I have nothing against that. If the box is your style, but when I look at the reviews on B&H and I look at, okay, I can kind of deduce how much of each of these sold. It seems to me that the S1H sold way more than the B S1H, the box version. Why is that? I'm glad it exists. I'm glad these cameras exist. But don't be fooled or tempted into thinking that this is the holy grail. Because the true holy grail, I think, is a proper mirrorless hybrid photography video camera that has fans or whatever they need to do to keep the thing cool. And it just has all the features built right in. I think that is what truly most people actually want, as long as it's not artificially limited and marketed as, well, this is for YouTubers, so we're not going to give you all the high-end stuff. We're not going to give you open gate. We're not going to give you shutter. You don't need that. You're an influencer. You're a YouTuber. Here, buy this rinky-dink garbage camera because you're an influencer. You're a vlogger. I don't know. I don't think anyone wants that. I think professionals want to be able to do a little bit of everything. And yeah, I'm sure they probably want to have a YouTube channel as well. There's plenty of professionals that aren't making money professionally on YouTube, but they have a YouTube channel because they want to talk about gear. They want to talk about cameras. They want to talk about lighting. And you need certain things in that environment. And the same as can be said for like the Sony Burano. They're putting IBIS in there. They're putting autofocus in there. All the YouTube vlogger favorites are now in a cinema camera. That's $25,000, I think. If I'm going from memory here. So there, that in the middle zone, again, maybe it's up to us to just decide what fits. And let's ignore all the marketing. Let's ignore the hype and say, what's the tool that I'm actually going to want to use that does the job, that achieves all the goals, and does it efficiently and fits into my workflow? For me, that has always been hybrid cameras. So I can take a picture, I can shoot a video, I can do whatever I need to do. And I just need, I need built-in NDs, electronic NDs. Just put them in there and it will be complete. Because the only thing extra, so let's see, what's the bare minimum requirements to shoot? It would be like making a camera, and they did for a while. I don't think they do this as much anymore. There used to be cinema cameras that didn't even have microphones built into them. And so it was this thing of, well, now you always have to add it. And I think, and NDs are the same way, because now NDs have become popularized as built-in on cinema cameras. Maybe not the red cameras. I don't think a lot of those have built-in NDs, but certainly on this kind of universal form factor, we're going to put the NDs in there. We're going to make sure it has a microphone, because yes, it's not the microphone you're going to use, but it's helpful to have it without anything else. Because if you don't have a microphone, you always need to bring one. So I feel the same way about the ND filters. If they're not built in, I always have to bring them with me. And I probably will do that forever, have ND filters. But if it's built in, it's one less thing I don't have to bring. And let's see, I need the camera body, a lens, and a battery and a memory card. As long as I have those 4 things, the camera is functional. I need a battery to charge it, to power it. I need a lens to see. I need a body to hold the sensor and control the functions. And I need a memory card to record. Beyond that, how I expand it, that's up to me and what I do. But I need those things. And the only thing outside of that equation, and the microphone is built in, of course. So I'll bring extra wireless mics and rig it up and do all the things. I'll have a monitor, but as long as I got the built-in LCD, I don't need to always have them. I can shoot without it. So electronic ND is the last missing piece to that puzzle for me. IBIS, I'm stable. Autofocus, great. Log, all the codecs, yes, give me the best that don't cause the camera to overheat. And I think we'll be good. All right. Panasonic have any new releases? So I'll wrap things up here. They had firmware updates for the S5 Mark II and the S5 Mark II X, which I believe the firmware is slightly different between those two, even though oddly enough, you wouldn't think it would be, but it is. But it's proxy recording for the Lumix cameras. I don't know about Panasonic if there's anything else beyond those. I haven't seen it yet, but that is what I do know. They did announce some new firmware for the S5 Mark II that allows you to record proxies as well as integrate with camera to cloud. And then you say, I see the Pixie is a great second cam. I would put this on sticks and add a monitor if using with another Blackmagic. Doesn't need much rigging if using it that way. Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's always a use for these things. So if that's how you'd use it, then great. All right. Alexander, simply the data requirements for this is a pain. Data management in terms of buying servers and drives. Simply the data requirements. Are you talking about versus 12K and RAW and having all those expanded features? I'm good recording 4K ProRes for years to come, to be honest. That's true. And we've always been at these competing interests and what's possible with cameras. For the longest time, the technology was good as far as like acquisition, but then storage was kind of the weak link. The hard drives weren't big enough. We didn't have good memory cards. And then those all caught up. And now we've got, 4 terabyte SD cards. You know, you have crazy data limits. But still, beyond the SD cards, the RAID hard drives, the actual safety security of where you're transferring all that footage to, still is quite expensive, especially if you're looking at anything in SSD land, not hard drive land, but SSDs alone. To rig that, to configure it, it gets far more complicated. If you're looking at something like a QNAP, you can get like 100 terabytes, but setting it all up, maintaining all of it is quite taxing. It's quite time consuming and it's quite expensive. So there is diminishing returns when a lot of the stuff is like a live stream or it's a quick, content creation thing. It's a YouTube video. Gosh, I think almost every video is digitized in some way, because even the most premium Hollywood blockbusters are making their way to streaming. So they're going to be on Netflix. They're going to be, on Disney Plus or wherever it is, Apple TV. So at the end of the day, when it's streaming to someone's house and that streaming is only so fast, they're not getting the ultimate picture quality. It is being compressed to some degree. So it's a balancing act. There is good enough on the acquisition side for a lot of people. If you're Hollywood and you have all the money in the world, then yeah, go nuts. But for day-to-day regular users, you know, your working professionals who need to consider things like budget, yeah, it can be quite challenging to navigate and figure out, okay, well, what do I actually need? 4K, yes. 10-bit, yes. 422, yes. These are things I need. Do I need RAW? Do I need 12-bit, 16-bit? Harder to say. Yeah. I think that's it. I think that's where we'll leave things. It's a good NAB. Always love to see the new stuff. Always love to see it. But there's nothing quite speaking my language yet. Give me that S1H Mark II, and I will be beyond happy. With phase detect and built-in NDs. I want to see it.